Well, hi there, everybody. Welcome to the show. First thing I want to do is introduce my very good friend and co-host for this show, Dr.
Yeah.
Kristi Winters. Kristi, how are you?
Hi, Steve. I'm doing very well. Thank you for asking. And yourself?
Pretty good, pretty good. And we have decided to do this to talk about a mutual acquaintance of ours, someone whose work we have actually talked about before, although it's been a few years. So,
hmm
Kristi, would you like to introduce our special guest?
Yeah, so returning to these, I guess, quadrennial check-ins is James Mansell, who is, we know people who know each other, and James does shorts and like some other like cinema related things. He was on last time to talk about some of his work. You've done more work since then, and you contacted me because of something that you brought out really recently. And before I let you say anything, James, I just want to tell everyone in the audience that I love your work so much because I really enjoy your brand of psychological drama or thriller, suspense. And so when you had your most recent, The Corridor, that you shared with me, it was so intense. And so I'm really excited to talk to you. And yeah, James, you want to tell the audience a little bit about your background in film and your
Yeah,
perspective?
yeah. Oh, well, thanks for having me on again. Great to chat. Yeah, well, I mean, I've been making short films for 5 or 6 years now, and I've been focusing on horror for about that time. Before that, I was doing lots of other things, and but yeah, I have been making. I think I've made 5 or 6 shorts, all in the sort of same sort of themes and things like that. Yeah, I mean, I think it's about just trying to like, explore what you find interesting and what sort of floats your boat and experiment. So the corridor certainly was a chance to do something that was completely different that I'd never done before. And the idea, I guess, is you can stand back and look at them all. If you want to watch them all in a row, then you see a lot of different things and a lot of different sort of flavors. So yeah, but no, it's great to hear that you would like them all. That's yeah, that's the idea is you could watch them all in one go and just be like, there's a lot of fun stuff there.
Oh, I think that you have to kind of say you need to emotionally recover from the end of some of your shorts. I don't think people could binge watch them. Couldn't be a Netflix series, for instance. But before I let Steve talk, I have one question for you. Because I think when you deal in the genre of horror, people, because of the genre itself, its look is dark, people are dark, it's very morose and morbid, and you're not. You're like a really pleasant,
Yeah.
happy guy. Your background is white in it. So what is it about this genre? Like, what kind of draws you to this?
Yeah, it's a very good question. You get that with a lot of people, I think. Like everyone that is interested in anything like this is it is not, it's not them at all. It's just but I don't know. I get that question quite a lot, and I think it's hard to explain. I think there's something in liking entertainment and sort of an experiential feeling that you get that is just is very fringe, and it's not really what you're expecting, and it's on the edge, and it's I think it's kind of like the thrill of a roller coaster. It's an adrenaline rush that I may not get scared when I watch things very occasionally, but I don't do it so I can sort of be really frightened. It's just an attraction to things which are just darker and just spooky, which is what people used to love way back in the Victorian era. People went around and sat around a campfire and told each other ghost stories, and it was a safe thrill. I much prefer to sit and turn off the lights and completely immerse myself in something which I'm going to be keen to turn the lights back on, but then I'm safe. And I thought that was great. That was fun. I prefer that to something that sort of gives me a thrill or I find funny, or they're fine. But this sort of genre, the horror genre, whatever you want to call it, suspense, it is you completely immerse yourself in it, and getting scared, I think, is probably the most heightened emotion you can feel when you're watching something or reading something or kind of experiencing something. So yeah, I mean, I've tried to answer that a few times, and it's just that, you know, you just get kind of hooked on it, and then it's it's just sort of what you dig, basically.
Steve, you want to come in on this now? So,
yeah. Well,
sure
yeah.
you have things to say.
Well, you know, we were talking before we went live a little bit about how I appreciate the fact that, James, you're able to do so much in so little screen time. You probably don't know this because we don't really talk, but one of my major pet peeves about movies and TV shows as well, is pacing. And when I think that something is too long, you know, I'm very much a murder your darlings kind of writer, where it's like, if you can take something out, take it out. You know, like, it doesn't mean that everything needs to be cut down to the bone, but, you know, be very, very mindful of, do you need this? Does this need to be this long? Does this need to take that much time? And I feel like, you know, run times of things have gone completely bonkers. I mean, even good movies, like I saw the new Batman movie a couple weeks ago and thought it was great, but the thing is close to 3 hours long.
Yeah.
You know, and even though I really like it, there's a part of my brain that goes, does a Batman movie need to be 3 hours long? You know, and I watch your stuff where it's like, you know, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 8 minutes, like very, very short run times. And yet you get an idea across, you develop character, you create tension, and it's like, it's a nice, I would show one of your films if anybody ever argued with me and said, well, you know, like, it needed to be that long because if he hadn't had that much time, they couldn't have developed this or this or this. You know, I can show them one of your movies and say, okay, I'm not saying everything should be 8 minutes long because obviously that's not what I'm saying. But if you want to see how much you can get done in a short amount of time, watch something like this and you can see, you know, how much you can do with just a few minutes. It's really remarkable. That's probably my favorite thing about your work, is that it's you do so much with such a short runtime.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's a very conscious decision, and I think, I mean, everything I do, you know, all the brands, corporate stuff I make, it's always make it shorter, and I think anything shorter is better because it's harder to hold someone's attention for longer. You know, that's kind of, if I get sent a short film and I click play on it and it's 25 minutes, I'm just like, first of all, I don't have 25 minutes. Like, you know, that there's a very practical reason for making shorts short. If you're hoping your shorts are going to be seen by very time poor people, producers, studios, whatever it is, we pitched a short I made called Nightmares, and it went around a lot of studios, and, you know, it's an ongoing thing, and it's 3 minutes. And we were out and we sent it to one studio, and on the way, we sent it while driving to them, and we said, we're coming by, can you watch this? And then 10 minutes later we arrived and they'd watched it, because they were just like, you know, waiting for the kettle to boil or whatever. Yeah. So there's a very practical reason to keep it short. And I also realized quite early on, it's harder to make something short and more effective, so that you can do anything in 20 minutes, you know, long scenes of people talk all the story out. You know, you see something in 2 minutes that gets across the same punch. Like, it's more of a challenge, and therefore it's basically you're showing what you can do in that short space of time. So yeah, I've always been, and I'm constantly cutting things down. And the 8-minute film you're talking about was originally 11, and I showed it, and it was like, it needs to be shorter. And I still think 8's on the long side for me. You know, I'd love to try and do something that's 30 seconds. You know, and I've seen stuff that short, and it's brilliant. It's I was watching a TV show recently, and we put it on, and it was 10-minute episodes, and I was just like, loved it. It was brilliant because it was so quick. It was different. It was bam, 10 minutes, next 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. I was like, I'll take that over 8-hour episodes, because it's, that's a lot of time to sit through. So yeah, no, I totally agree. I think, and a short film's short. That's the idea, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, I think, like, just in television, like, I think one of the most underused and underrated mediums is a 30-minute show, because at least I think it's the same over there where you are, but here in the United States, it's like 30 minutes is generally thought of as like, well, that's a comedy. Comedies are 30 minutes and dramas are an hour on and even in streaming services, even though the run times are a little more spongy, it sticks to that. If something is 20-30 minutes, it's usually a comedy. If something is 45 minutes to an hour, it's a drama, right? And I have always thought that there is a space for 30-minute drama or more serious shows that just has never really been explored, other than with a few exceptions, because we just have this mindset of, well, if it's a drama, it has to be an hour, and it just, there's like one of the greatest television shows ever was the original Twilight Zone, which was 30-minute episodes, and they're just these perfect little stories. And it's like, you don't need anymore. And when they did one season of the original Twilight Zone where they did do an hour, and there are way fewer memorable episodes in that season, because it's like, you get it. There's a pace and there's a punch and there's a rhythm to it, where you almost lose something with the extra time. Like, I can totally see what you're saying. I can't, the 8-minute film of yours, the Man in the Living Room, which is my favorite one of yours. Yeah, I don't like, it's almost difficult for me to imagine an 11-minute cut of that, and we're talking about 3 minutes, but it's like, no, of course you wouldn't want to make it longer. Like, what else would you need, So yeah, that instinct to make it as short as you can, and not to just cut it to the bone just for the sake of it, just to see how short we can make it. But like, if you don't need it, if this doesn't add anything, if this doesn't make it better, then get rid of it.
Yeah, that's the main thing. If you don't need it, get rid of it. I made a film called RUPTURED. Originally, I think it was about 8 or 9 minutes. We got it down to 5 or 6, and there was an entire character that a friend of mine watched it and said, well, what happens if you remove that character, like cut their shots out? And I did it as an experiment, and nothing changed. Like, the story was stayed the same. You still got the same impact. Basically, it was like, oh, that was completely unnecessary. So then I just started going through it and cutting everything, and what is the shortest version that still gets the film across? And that's always what you should aim for. And I have watched films and thought, like, half of this not necessary, make this like this, and kind of make it a punch instead of a snooze. So
yeah.
So this might be a good time to maybe show Under the Bed. Because it really follows those principles.
Because it's super short.
It is. So it's also good for the live stream too, because it doesn't take too much time.
All right, so I practiced this earlier, and I think I figured out how to do this. So I'm first, for our viewers, I'm going to switch their view to my web browser so everybody can see what we're about to watch. And then, for the benefit of Kristi and James, I will screen share it so we can all watch
audio.
it. Yeah, with audio, indeed. So we can all share the goodness.
Yes.
Okay. So I think we should be good to go here. So this is, I think we talked about this one last time we had James on and talked about his work, but this is a really, really neat little 2.5-minute short called Under the Bed. So here we go.
you still awake? Come on. Time to go to sleep, yeah? You ready to close your eyes? Yeah? Hi, mate.
Dad, wait.
What's the matter?
Before you go, will you check under the bed?
Yeah, of course I will.
Someone on my bed.
Still freaks me out. It was the last thing I expected.
It is such a, it's so simple, you know?
Yeah.
So
And-
James,
Yeah.
go ahead.
No, I was going to say I haven't seen that in a while. Actually, that's it's like my own little retrospective. That's it's let's do that.
I've noticed a kind of carry through. You have what can I call this a languid camera style?
Mhm.
Because I think motion and movement is really important for your storytelling. And, you don't do jump scares, at least that I can really remember. Not in that sort of like
I've done one. I did
Okay.
one that was a horrible big crash jump scare that was just like a jump scare.
Okay. Which
But
one
no,
was that?
not normally. That was Nightmares. The very end of Nightmares.
Oh, okay. A bit of a jump scare, yeah.
Yeah.
But not normally, right? It's not something you rely on. So yeah, I was wondering if Steve has a question too, but yeah, you want to talk a little bit about the role of movement in your shorts?
Yeah, I mean, I think that was the first short I did that I'd said I'll do a horror film. I'd done others, different sort of genres, but yeah, I mean, the camera is always moving, and I think I did a few since that were in that sort of quite measured compositions and slow, and everything sort of creeping, and and that, I guess, it's sort of replicating the dad creeping and everything's pushing, but that's something which I learned as a camera operator when I used to work on broadcast TV, was just everything has to move. You need, if something is static, unless it's really purposefully static, and that's the point, if you just hold on something very quickly, just you lose your energy in it. And so yeah, I mean, I've always tried to use, and I think every director probably does, but try to use the camera as another role in the storytelling, and you're not simply just covering it. You're not sort of creating a window into the scene that's sort of this sort of just stand at the back of the room and watch. You're very much like, the camera needs to feel like it's controlled by the people in it. And then for something like this, it's the whole thing is slow and creeping. So that opening kind of track down the corridor, all of that, it's all kind of in the music. You really want to. The aim is to try and make everything feel like it belongs in that film, and it has the music and the language and the lighting and everything. It all feels like it's from the same DNA. If we shot that yeah, exactly. Yeah, I mean, if you shot that handheld, it wouldn't look right. So yeah, it's definitely an important factor, and I think it's something you just sort of naturally find yourself thinking about when you come to think, right, how are we actually going to shoot this?
Anything on that, Steve?
Yeah, I remember the last time we talked, this was one of the movies that we talked about, and I remember saying then, and I still feel the same way now, I love that last before the cut back into the hall, that last camera move from under the bed to on top of the bed, and just again, talking about movement, like the pace of that is just perfect. It's not too fast, it's not too slow. It's just a nice smooth move from under the bed, where you see the kid under the bed, and then you kind of go behind the bed and it goes black for a second, and then you're up there and there's the kid on top of the bed and the look on the dad's face. It's just, the timing of it is just tremendous. And again, it's such a simple idea, and like the filmmaking is so good because it doesn't distract from that idea.
Mhm.
You know, it gives you the chance to where you're watching it and you're almost unconscious of, I mean, unless you're watching it specifically, you know, to be critical and analytical of it. If you're just watching it just as a viewer, you're not thinking about, oh, that was a cool camera move, you know, or oh, this shot is framed really well. That's all just sort of going in your head, but you're not thinking about it. All you're getting is you get
What's
to
on
that,
top of the bed?
you see the kid under the bed and you're like, who the fuck is that?
Yeah.
You know, and then it's just such a perfect little twist where he's like, Dad, there's someone, you know, the first kid says, Dad, there's someone under the bed. He looks under the bed. The same kid is under the bed. And he says, Dad, someone's on my bed. It's just, what a great idea. And, you know, and it's just, yeah, I really like that one too. I mean, it's,
Well, it's
fantastic.
actually it's originally from it's an internet 2-sentence horror story.
yeah, I think you mentioned that. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
it's been made before. I submitted it to a film festival and they rejected it because they said they had the exact same film the previous year, and they were like, "Did you see it?" So I've seen other people do it differently, and there's a version which is sort of 6 minutes, and it goes into the relationship between the parent and the boy, or in that case, a girl. There's another one which doesn't show what's on the bed. It comes up, and just as you're about to see it, it cuts. You know, so it's interesting. You see sort of different ways of doing it, and
yeah.
I found that I thought I need to find a really simple story, and you know, I don't know if I do that again, because I did just think, right, I didn't have to write it, you know, I sort of just lifted it off one of those stories. But yeah, the simplicity of it is, I think, what made me think this is it. This is you know, and yeah, you're right. And the whole thing about the length of it, you know, you don't need to know anything. Even what it's funny watching it. I played it at a festival, and the opening title, which is the title, animates, and then there's a crow. It's about 12 seconds, I think, in total. And when we played that in front of an audience for the first time, like, people weren't engaged by it. They looked away and they were kind of checking their phones. I've never done a title at the top of a short film before, like ever since, because it's not necessary. Your first frame is the first frame of the film. So watching that now, I'm like, why did I waste so much time? Could have been under 2 minutes, which, you know. So yeah, I feel like you could have made it shorter, but you know, maybe that would have been too.
That's how you're evolving over time too, your taste, right, and your sense of pacing and everything. So yeah.
Well, and you know, I haven't seen any of the other versions. Like you mentioned, there's like a 6-minute film made from the same idea. I haven't seen that, so I can't speak to that. But I watch your version, and like and a part of it is it's just the way my brain works, and the things about stories and the things about films that I personally find interesting. I don't care about their relationship. Like, I don't want to see more about the kid and his I get everything I need right there. Mm-hmm. Like, I don't need to know what their backstory is. That's not the point. That's not what it's about. You know, so I mean, and you know, maybe I would watch that longer version, and I would love that too. And I think actually this is a good take. But you know, just having seen this version, I'm not thinking, well, this is good, but you know, I need more about the dad and his son.
What's his motivation?
I don't. Yeah, exactly.
You know it.
Yeah. Well, that's the old adage that you apply to any scene writing in general, and I think it applies to shorts, which is get in late and leave early. Yeah. You know, I think you don't need to know where the dad came from. You don't need to know, like, as soon as you've got the punchline, which is, oh my god, there's you know, there's a kid on the bottom and on the top, then you're out, and that's it. Yeah. You know, you could have gone further, but
I don't know. I don't know if they just don't teach that in screenwriting classes anymore, or if people just got comfortable ignoring it. But I like to play a little game with myself sometimes, where I'm watching a movie and I watch the movie and I try to pick the scene that should have been the first scene and see how far into the movie it is. Yeah. You know, I forget which movie I was watching recently. I was watching a movie recently. I think it was one of the movies that my friend Jason Harding and we do a movie review podcast. And I'm pretty sure it was a movie I was watching for that, but I can't remember which movie it was. But it was one where it was just, I watched it, and maybe 10 minutes into the movie was the scene that should have been the first scene. and you could have taken the first 10 minutes and just lopped it completely off and said, you know what it was? It was the Eternals. It was the Marvel movie, the Eternals. I got
the editing on that left it.
I got 10 minutes into that, and there was a scene about 10 minutes in, and I thought, this is the first scene. All this other stuff building up to it, you can lose completely, and instantly your movie's 10 minutes shorter. You know, and so I do that too, like not just with scenes, with entire movies. Where I'm like, why didn't they start here? This is where they need to start. We don't need this other stuff. But for whatever reason, you know, people are a lot more comfortable letting things sort of loosening up to the point where it's like, yeah, fuck it, we'll just hang out with the characters. Know?
We'll do like 10 minutes of status quo establishment.
Well,
you know, so we know how they're growing.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, I think if you tune into professional screenwriting and what, you know, and most of the time scenes start they start at the point which you get all the information you need probably from a single image, and then you're in. And where if you go back and you watch films from sort of the 50s, if someone arrives at a house and the scene is them having a conversation with someone in the house, the car will pull up, they'll get out the car, they'll walk to the door, they'll ring the doorbell, they'll go in. If you watch that scene now, when everything is shorter, and certainly if you wrote that scene, you would have the person ring the doorbell with their car behind them, and they'd open the door and they're in. And that's a line in a script instead of a page. Or, you know, then I guess I find more, more and more I do this, it's like, just keep cutting things out. And you just get to it quicker, and nobody wants to, you know, you run the risk of boring the person watching, which is like, you know, the last thing you want to do.
Worse than, yes, in media.
Exactly. Yeah.
So Steve, since should we move now to talking about like wanting to talk about things or whatever? There was a tie-in, there was a segue there, but then the threads of it disappeared. The Man in the Living Room. Sell me on why this is your favorite thing.
Yeah.
Should we discuss? Are we going to discuss spoilers in this, or how are we going to do this? I guess maybe we should.
Well, I guess how much of it do you want to show? Maybe
that's a James question too. It's not my work. So.
Yeah,
James, you have to.
How much are we allowed to show?
Well, you could probably show. There's two scenes: the scene in the kitchen. I mean, you could probably stop when the scene in the kitchen finishes.
Okay, that's what I was gonna say, but yeah.
That's the trailer.
Yeah. Yes. The kitchen is the trailer. The kitchen is the hook.
And then you have to go, yes, at some point, I don't know if you have the links for his Vimeo channel in
the links to
description?
the links to the videos are in the description. And viewers can get to the Vimeo channel through there. But yeah, I mean, highly recommend. I know there's people in the chat saying, "Oh, where can I find his short films?" On Vimeo. It's linked in the description.
Yeah, so we're going to give you a preview, and then you have to finish it over on James's channel.
So let me make sure I have that one queued up.
It feels like doing like a movie, an actual, you know, it's just kind of fun to do the clips now and toss it back and forth. It's nice to, you know. I think this is much easier than it was 4 years ago, if I remember. I think so. Probably Google Hangouts was not as high quality.
Well, Google Hangouts is dead now.
Yes, well and truly.
Okay, here we go. This is a portion of The Man in the Living Room.
Rebecca.
Jesus Christ, just get the life out of me.
There is a man in the living room. I have no idea who he is.
How did he get in here? Have you seen him?
I've spoken to him.
So, he's not a burglar?
I don't know. I don't think so.
Right, well, what did he say to you?
I was in the bedroom and I heard this bang coming from the living room, so I went downstairs to see what it was. He was just stood there, hunched over in the middle of the room, looking right at me. It was like he was waiting for me. Rebecca, I've been here all night. I don't know where it came from.
What does he look like?
Well, he's wearing dirty black clothes. Yeah, he has mud or something all over him. He has really long, black, greasy hair. There's just something off. Something really off about him.
Christ, Peter. Why would you want to scare me like this? You know what I've been through. I'm supposed to be relaxing. Another brilliant idea.
I'm not joking, okay? I'm really not joking. I'd never do something like this to you.
Okay.
He said he used to live here and he's come back to stay. Rebecca, he said, I don't belong here.
So why haven't you called the police?
Because he told me not to. Rebecca, I'm not joking, okay? Go and speak to him.
Okay, we'll stop it there.
That's evil, but also good.
Hey, it's, you know what? Go watch it on Vimeo, please, because it is fantastic. And yeah, it's so good. It's so good. They're just the tension, you know. That's what I think. That's what got me about that one. That's what, because like I was telling you before we started, today was the first time I watched that. And the tension between those two characters and that opening line when Pete walks in and says, "There's a man in the living room." It's just such a great opening line.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, it was fun having him like have the name of the title of the film said like instantly.
Yeah.
It was something to do.
And it's an inherently compelling situation, because you can tell by the way they're acting, there's not supposed to be a man in the living room. Like, he's obviously kind of disturbed about it. And it's just like, what's going to happen next? What's going on? Who is the man in the living room? You know? And I won't spoil the ending. Hopefully people who see this will be intrigued enough to click the link in the description and go watch the whole thing on Vimeo. But I mean, the ending is just perfect.
Oh yeah, watching it back the second time,
yeah.
having watched it through the first time. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's all I'm going to say about that.
It's nice to hear. That was a hard, difficult one to make, because that was everything I think I'd done before. And it's funny, I see everything and like there's an order, and it was done because of, you know, it's kind of seeing things as a body of work and kind of how does this fit in and what haven't I done? And I think I wanted to do something which had real people in it, and they had a relationship, and everything I've done before, the people in it were, you could switch them out. They were far more proof of concepts, as in, doesn't matter who these people are, it's the concept. And that's what I was trying to do. And, you know, you can expand that, and, you know, and the idea being you could expand it into a feature idea, and then you can, you know, but that was, how do you tell a compact story on its own that's creepy in the day? There's a very particular scene from one of my favorite films that it's inspired by, which is Mulholland Drive. There's a scene in Mulholland Drive in the diner, and it's like one of the greatest scenes, and it's a very bizarre scene with two people speaking, and the camera basically is over their shoulders like you would expect, but the camera is the kind of this drifting, and it moves, and it's finding strange places, and it's constantly moving, and it gives it a very kind of dreamlike quality. And that was the idea, just to sort of, how do you make something in a kitchen and then in the living room just feel off, and things in the day that feel off are weirder than the night, because everything's in the night if it's scary. But so that was the idea, just to do something that was strange and and in the day, and it stands out, I think, because I haven't done anything like that before. So yeah, it was a fun and challenging one to make.
And it's just, the thing I appreciated about it is how minimalist it is. I mean, it's just two characters talking, and that's the only way we know about the situation, you know. And yet it's like the tension is so palpable, you know. And that, for some reason, the line that gets me, that really hooked me and made me think, oh boy, this is good, is when she says, he you know, says, oh, there's a guy in the living room, and he says a couple other things, and then she asks him something about him, and when he says, I've spoken to him, and I'm just like, you what? Like, there's just something about that's the direction to take. Like, it wasn't just like some ghost standing in the living room and he was like, oh, what was that? It's like, no, you talked to the guy, and then you came in here to tell her about it.
So British.
It's like, I've just spoken to him. I love when he okay, so there's this obviously very unusual situation, and there's a guy in his living room that he's never seen before, has no idea what he's doing there or how he got in. He's covered in dirt. He's dressed in black clothes. He has long, greasy hair. And he says, there's just something off about him. And I love that so much.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, that sort of weird dream logic to the it's all kind of and the way, so that's a really great actor, Jamie Shelton, the way he acted that was it's inspired by David Lynch, because there's this whole sort of delay and response that he has that makes you feel like people take longer to process things, and you're kind of in this odd dreamlike sort of state. And so the way he is acting quite strange is, you know, that's all sort of, you know, there's something just not right about this whole situation. So yeah, it's definitely intentional, and the dialogue is a little bit off. It's not kind of, yeah, like he's just come in the kitchen and he's just like, I left him in there, you know. She's like, that's weird. Why would you do that?
It is very Lynchian, and that I've never attempted that, like, either. I mean, I haven't done a lot of filmmaking, and I haven't done a lot of writing for a while, at least not writing like this. But I've never really tried to get that feeling, but I really admire it and appreciate it when I see it in other people's work. And yeah, Lynch is great at it, where it's just that feeling of you, and you describe it as being dreamlike, and I think that's part of it. But part of it is, it's like, it's hard to put your finger on exactly what it is. But yeah, it's that sense of something's just a little off about this. And it's only off a little bit. Like, it's not super weird. It's not like, you know, everything is upside down. It's just, things are just like, something just, I can't put my finger on it, but something's just not right here. And it's so creepy, you know?
Yeah, totally. I mean, David Lynch is a genius, and he makes horror films. They're just not classed as horror films. You know, the scene in the diner in Mulholland Drive, there's this fantastic bit where the guy's he's recalling a dream, and he's saying, and then he says, we're in this, and you're here, and then he turns around and he says, but you're stood over there. And they both look at this, and it holds on this empty shot, and they look and they just stare, and they stare back at each other. And it is really, really creepy, but you're like, you've no idea why. And the other amazing, fantastic scene in a Lynch film, which is a short film, I wish you know, I could have written it, but is in Lost Highway, when Bill Pullman is approached by I've forgotten his character's name.
Robert, isn't it? Was it Duvall who played that role? Oh, you know, I'm sorry, maybe I'm thinking of a different scene.
Yeah, no, not
Is
that.
that at the party? Okay.
It's at the party, yeah. And basically he's approached by him, and he says, I'm in your house. And he says, no, you're not. He says, call the house phone. And he calls the house phone, and the sound in the party disappears. So that scene is silence. And you're just like, like I've fallen asleep. And he rings the house phone, and the guy answers and says, "See, I'm in your house." And you're just like, it's so strange, but it is one of the scariest scenes I think anyone in cinema.
I agree.
It's so nonsensical, but it's just it's terrifying.
The scene that I think it's a scene that a lot of people talk about, but my taste isn't always as adventurous as other people's. But the scene that I love the most in Mulholland Drive is the cowboy scene, and that's another one where, like, I imagine if you read that scene in the script, it probably doesn't seem much of anything at all. But that's probably the case for a lot of Lynch stuff. Like, if you just read it on the page, it probably doesn't jump out at you where you're thinking, oh my God, this is genius. But you watch that scene and it's, a film director has been called to a mysterious meeting and he's there waiting for the person he's supposed to meet. And out of the shadows steps this dude in a cowboy hat who is the creepiest dude ever. But you can't quite peg what makes him creepy. It's like he speaks very carefully. He kind of seems like he's angry, but he's not like showing his anger. He seems like he's losing patience with this smart ass film director. And it's like maybe in any second he's going to snap and do something, but he never does. And and it's that same thing where it's just like, I don't know what makes this scary. I don't know what makes this creepy. It's intangible, but ooh, damn.
Yeah.
And that's definitely in that film in the Man in the Living Room.
Robert Blake.
That's it. Yeah.
He played the very pale dude. I agree. That's scary.
I would say that guy who killed his wife, but that doesn't narrow it down very much.
Well,
Who allegedly.
Yeah. On the Lynch thing, what I don't know if this makes any sense or not, but when it comes to situations like with Lynch or with your work, James, when you have something that's kind of like uncanny, one of the things it's like even in Lynch's Twin Peaks, right, when they would go to like the Red Room, and even though it was really scary, it was almost hypnotic. There's something, and I think about that, almost like you said, like a dream-like state, and I think when you consciously or subconsciously realize something is off like that, you tunnel vision in on it, right? I think our brains are kind of wired to notice things that are out of place and give them hyper awareness, and it kind of helps drown out the sound of the rest of the world, and you get sort of caught up in that fugue of, is this a threat to me? What is going on here? What is it, like, getting a bit in your mental surroundings, because you're not a physical surrounding, and so maybe it's tapping into some of those more primal instincts in our brains.
I mean, I think it's unexplainable, which is his whole thing. He kind of doesn't explain anything, but it's interesting using Lynch. Lynch obviously inspires a lot of filmmakers, but I think Lynchian is risking. You can parody it. It's very easy to make a David Lynch sort of moment, and but I just think it's a brilliant. Once you sort of figure out the tools and what he does, his Angelo Badalamenti's music is always very strange, and the sound design Lynch uses. He uses a lot of droning noises, and sort of texture that he just lays on the ground, and it's just there all the time. And it's, if you want a scene just to feel off, he is the master of it. But it's you can sometimes go a little bit too far, and just make something which feels like it's a bit too much of a homage to him. But
if you notice it, you've probably gone too far.
You can't do a scene where people speak backwards.
No, that's been done.
I've seen that somewhere before.
Or even like have a scene with red curtains and someone acting strange. You're like,
you're risking it. You're risking it at that point. I think one more thing about Lynch, since we're having a Lynch fan club meeting here. I think a lot of people who have imitated him or have tried to imitate him forget that another thing about a lot of his work is it's deeply sad. I mean, not every single thing he's ever done, but there's very often a layer of just deep, deep sadness underneath the weirdness. And people focus on the weirdness and the uncanny quality, and they don't reckon with the fact that he often deals with grief and with loss and with sort of a nostalgic wistfulness about,
Mm.
you know, dreams and, you know, the difference between dreams and reality. You know, like a lot of Mulholland Drive is about how Hollywood is sort of in our imagination this dreamland, and in
Mm.
reality it's a horrible nightmare that eats people alive. You know, and it's, there's a sadness about that. In Twin Peaks, like the first season of Twin Peaks, and even Angelo Badalamenti's theme song to Twin Peaks, it's so
Yeah.
sad. It's
Yeah.
just so deeply sad. And you know, the first season of Twin Peaks is about a teenager who was murdered. Like, yeah, there's a lot of weird, quirky stuff going on, but at the heart of it, it's just a deeply tragic story. And
Mm.
you know, a lot of people, I think, lose sight of that dimension of his work.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, Mulholland Drive is, the ending is, you know,
Oh,
is
yeah.
devastating. And I think that's why you can quite easily sort of, yes, it's strange and there's lots of weird stuff going on, but none of it's weird for the sake of it. It's all perfectly pitched and perfectly layered, and what he's getting at, the heart of it is very real. And I think you have to do that. I think ultimately, whatever you're saying, whatever the point is, it has to either you're making something that's just great fun, you know, like Under the Bed is good fun.
Yeah.
I'm not sort of, you know, or you make something and you go, well, you're going to walk away with a feeling and you're going to reflect on something, and that's the point of it. And yeah, I mean, I think everything he's done is about, yeah, you're right, it's about sadness and grief, which is an incredibly powerful thing to take on. And yeah, the more you think about it, Twin Peaks is very, you know, Fire Walk with Me is a tragic story of, you know, literally waiting for a girl to die, but you know the ending before, and it's just like her downward spiral and then her death. It's full on.
Mm-hmm. So, talking about full on, the corridor. Let's, if we could switch gears. And yeah, you've moved into a different style of I don't know if you want to say animation style or production, or yeah, what's the story behind that? And again, we'll let you kind of figure out where the boundaries are of how much you want to say about that one, because it's more of an experience than I mean, there's a story to it, but the story is really about, well, I'm going to shut up. Tell us about it.
So the corridor came about, basically I think I had done, you know, when you make films, you make shorts, you try one thing and you never try and repeat yourself, and you do something that's a little bit longer and shot differently. And I think I got to a point where I thought, I'm potentially going to start repeating myself. So I got, you know, I was at a point where I just thought, maybe there's something I can do which is just totally different. And it was actually inspired by David Lynch's very, very bad and strange animations that he's made himself, where he literally just, it's probably on paint, and I thought, I'll do that. I'll just grab a Sharpie and I'll scan and I'll do something really, really low key and, you know, simple. And I was playing a short film and to a friend of mine, a colleague, and he saw it and he said, I'd love to do something in horror. And he's an animator, Hakeem Ismail, and he went, can we do something together? And I had an idea, a concept that I wanted to shoot, all with POV, like trying to think of something new to do, something different style. And I had this whole like POV idea of a family that awakes in a corridor, an endless dark corridor, and that's the setup. And it's kind of like, you know, what do they do? It was very, I used to think of it as Cube meets the SCP Foundation, which is kind of, the SCP Foundation has a fantastic story, which is about I can't remember, it's got a number. It's about a downward spiral, a staircase. And it's just this endless staircase. And, you know, I thought, that's it, that's great. And so Hakeem and I were talking, and he showed me some of the stuff he'd done and some styles. And I took that idea and said to Hakeem, maybe we could do this. And and we just, yeah, we went with it, and it evolved into, like you said, something which is more of an experience. There is no really, you're not sort of working towards a punchline, or it's like it's kind of just something I'd never done, and it was just me and him, and it took us a long time, nearly 2 years to make it, and it was great. It was a lot of fun. So it's, yeah, I say it's experimental for me, and it's an animated, maybe surrealist, strange horror short.
Steve, do you want to come in on that at all?
Yeah, well, I mean, it definitely feels sort of avant-garde. And the thing that I liked about it is I love the art style. It reminds me of like underground comics. You know, parts of it are like watching an animated underground comic. Like, especially there are a couple of shots of like an extreme close-up of a character's face, and you can see reflections in his eyes. And sometimes you see like the reflection of the corridor stretching out ahead of him, and sometimes you see reflection of another person that he's thinking about. And I saw that shot, and I was like, it's like an R. Crumb panel from an underground comic, like just really intense, extreme close up, very high contrast, black and white. You see the veins in the eyes, and then just this really weird, interesting, like visual conceit of the perfect reflections in the eyes. That part really struck me. Yeah, I mean, and you're right. It doesn't have a plot per se. It runs on the atmosphere and sort of the emotion, and the visuals of it. But yeah, it's really, really cool. I really, really like it.
Well, yeah, so that style, so Hakeem, there's concept art. He did one frame, and it was it's like a water painting, and he was like, we'll do it like this. And then he started developing it, and he showed me basically his sort of work in progress, and it was the black and white sort of charcoal-y style. And I was like, well, that's it. And then I realized this could be, I have a deep love for film noir, and I thought we just, it can be film noir. The language can be heavily inspired by film noir. Mm-hmm. It's black and white, which film noir is all, is normally black and white. Yeah, and it was, the other great thing I enjoyed about it was everything I'd done up until then. I was very conscious of who would be seeing this, and thinking I've got to do something which, studios and producers are going to see, and I can pitch some concepts, and I can go this, and it's going to, and I need to make sure I show this. And when I first started making films, you're not aware of any of that. So you just make whatever you want and have fun and relax, and you just go for it. So this wasn't made for for a producer to see. There's no larger story behind it. It's just, here's something very different. And it's had some good responses. Some people have seen it and really liked it. And I think it, as far as everything I've done, it fills a nice gap to think this is something which is more of an experience, kind of sit back. And that's why I really like stretch long parts out, and it's strange, and it's I think there's a bit of Lynch thrown in there as well. So yeah, it was good. It was a great experience putting it together.
Can I say that watching it at what we hope is near the end of the pandemic, I actually felt like the weariness, like that's how I related to this piece, was the weariness of just being stuck and trapped. And so I was just wondering, to what degree was this influenced by COVID, or was this a completely just separate, not COVID, but the pandemic and claustrophobia and depression? And I don't want to get into too much, but about the kind of themes that we deal with being indoors kind of taps into, I think, some of the emotion in that piece. Yeah,
well, it's interesting because I think I always start from just a really simple idea, which is it would be a great starting point to find a person in an endless corridor of locked doors, like, go. That's it. And then the whole idea is like, do you try every door, or do you leave some doors out? Is one door going to open? Like, as a setup, I was just like, brilliant. And then, yeah, the more you get into it, and so the whole pandemic, we started it just before the pandemic. So it wasn't a sort of, yes, we made it during the lockdown, we finished it in lockdown, but it didn't start from that. But I think anything you make during development, when you know the idea is evolving, and this with animation, you don't kind of shoot and then edit. You tweak. The first thing you tweak, you can tweak at the very end of the process when it's just a small team. So I think the more we did it, the more we realized that this could touch on the pandemic and mental health, and this is very much an analogy for whatever you want it to be. You know, that's there isn't really. I don't have an answer to what it's about, which I think is great. You know, it's the making it abstract and making it open to interpretation is all art should be interpretable. So Hakeem was like, well, this is about mental health, like without a shadow of a doubt. That's how I see it, and maybe I see it a little bit differently. And so it did come into play, absolutely, but this wasn't. It
wasn't Bo Burnham doing a whole pandemic thing.
Yeah, exactly. It wasn't. This is how I felt. It feels like, yeah, sometimes when I'm struggling and trying to, you know, it might feel like all the opportunities are shut, you know, and none of them open. And so maybe that was in there as well. I remember making sure I remembered very early on that a door will open. That's not the point. The point is, how many do you try? As a general kind of motto for pursuing a goal, you don't try a few and sort of stop. You carry on. One will open. So yeah, it's a lot of everything, but the idea is it's sort of watch it and then you've kind of put yourself in it, put yourself in the corridor.
Steve, do you want a follow up? Otherwise, I'm going to ask about storyboarding and script writing. So.
Yeah, well, it strikes me that, you know, some films are about plot or characters, and some films are about emotions and feelings, and I think The Corridor is one of those, where, and not just like an emotional state of the person watching it, but just the feeling of the film, the tone of it, you know. And, you know, I mean, we keep bringing him up, but that's a very Lynchian thing too. I feel like that's how he works, is that he makes movies that are, they're not character centered or plot centered, they're feeling centered and theme centered and tone centered, you know. And that's how I feel about The Corridor. And yeah, it's like there must be no end of ways that people could interpret it. And I like that about it. And, you know, I sometimes I talk to other people about David Lynch movies, or about like 2001: A Space Odyssey, or other movies that, you know, that sometimes people will watch them and they'll go, well, what does it mean? You know, what's it about? And I lose patience with people like that sometimes, because I just want to say, you know, if the director wanted you to be able to tell what it was about exactly, they would have made it differently. They wouldn't have made it that way. Like, it's maybe they did have something specific in mind, but if they wanted to just tell you what it was, they would have done that. They left it ambiguous or open to interpretation for a reason. So stop trying to nail it down. That's not the point. You know?
Yeah.
And I know that's a natural impulse that we all have. We want to solve the puzzle. But I mean, with some films, with some art in general, like you're kind of missing the point if all you're focused on is, well, I've got to decipher it, I've got to decode it and figure out what the message is. Like, just how does it make you feel? You know?
I think, I mean, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's certainly two types of films, and one is far more commercial, where this is a story about a person, and the point is what you're seeing, and the other one is about how it makes you feel. You know, I watched David Lowery's The Green Knight recently, the A24 film, which is a very strange film, but I mean, it was refreshing to see a film that was far more tonal and emotional, and it was an experience than just follow a person on a course of events, and the end of the film will end when the events end, and that's kind of it. And I think there's a place for both of them, but I think a lot of the great filmmakers, like Kubrick, and it was less about the actual plot as far as following the story. There's quite a popular school of thought that films tied to novels are basically that they are far too literate, and they kind of everything is about story beats and that's it. Whereas if it's tied more to an emotion or a feeling or a tone, then it's more like art. You sort of sit back and you can think, I don't need to follow the story, I just need to be aware of how this makes me feel. So yeah, the corridor is certainly, that's what it is. That was, and I haven't done that before. It's because as a filmmaker, you want to show that you can tell stories with characters. That's what gets you, that's what gets you employed. But it's great to be able to say, well, this is how I'm going to make you feel something, I don't know what, after 5 minutes. So I think as if you're making shorts and you're making, I think it's very important to have a bit of both, to show that sort of diversity.
Yeah. So how organized are you with your storyboards and your scripting, and how does, do you have a wall with panels up? Do you I use stick figures, to be honest, but I don't make very complicated videos. So yeah, what's your process like? Does it obviously depends maybe on what you're doing, but an overview.
Yeah, I mean, it is very dependent on the project, but I'm from a camera department background, so I spent 5 years working as a camera operator on broadcast TV on shows like Geordie Shore and the Great British Bake Off, and so I came from a camera background, so depicting things through cameras and is always very, I think about that kind of at the same time as thinking about the story, which for better or for worse. So it's it's a lot of planning, it's a lot of just carefully working things out, and I think the prep I do is I want to go in knowing that there's no doubt how this will fall together. I know exactly what I'm doing, and it's very, very well worked out, but you can never plan it to 100%. You accept, you'll go, we'll shoot this and we'll shoot a wide, and then you get there and it doesn't work for whatever reason. So you've planned it with enough ideas to think, well, I've got other ideas, in case it doesn't work. And the more I've done it, the more I think that's fine, I think I know what to do there, but there's enough time and there's enough sort of scope on the day to figure it out. But a lot is also the budget. It's a lot of those films was self-financed, and you make them and they cost as much as they cost. And I don't always think I've got X amount, so I'll budget the whole film. I've since done work, and I do a lot of work for brands and companies, and every penny has to be worked out. And it's better to do that even with your own money, and when you feel a little bit looser doing it, like whatever, it doesn't matter how much it costs, because giving yourself boundaries and a structure, other than that's just the way the world works. And if you go on to work for other people, you can't just do whatever you want. But knowing that you have to shoot this in an hour, you've only got half an hour to set up, and then you get it done. And that's the main thing, is what prep can you do just so you get it done and you make it, and you don't walk away at the end of the day going, we're missing half the film because I didn't really plan anything. It's failing to plan is planning to fail, pretty much.
Anything relatable there, Steve?
Yeah, actually, I'm keeping one eye on our live chat, and one of our viewers, Jojo, just asked a really interesting question that maybe James, you have some insight on. Jojo asks, is script writing the best way to become a director?
I think yes. I don't know if it's the best way. I think a director has to know how to write. you won't find any working director that has never written anything. And is, you know, when I started, I put writers on such a pedestal. I thought, I can't be a director and a writer. I'm not going to be one of these uber talented writer directors. I'm going to direct because I'm more of a visual person. But then no one gives you scripts. No one says, oh, I've got a short film that you'll love. So, you know, you write your own. So you start writing and you start writing, and then you start realizing that it's part of the process. You can write, and it's a very important role of it. And if you don't write, then you work closely with a writer. A director will always, even if they're not a writer, they'll get the script and they'll have to comment on it. They'll have to understand the script. They'll have to understand the acts and the breaks, and you know, and how it's been pieced together, and script and scene length, and you know, a director has to know that language. So the great Akira Kurosawa says, if you want to learn how to direct, write scripts. That's how you learn to direct, because it's like a musician that doesn't know how to write music. They just play, and I doubt any musician's never written anything. So yeah, I would say it's a very important part. You don't have to consider yourself a writer, but in the same sense, a director knows what to do with the camera, where to put the camera, what to do with the lenses, where the light should go. They're not a cinematographer, but they have to understand it. So pick up a camera and shoot. You know, you do have to try and have done all the roles. I mean, you know, most directors can do everything themselves. It's not as good as the professionals, but they can do it. And I think that includes writing.
Yeah, there's definitely a language that you need to know how to speak, you know. And I know for me, I've never directed anything on any kind of a serious level. My training is as a writer, but I very much believe in the old adage that the director is the final author of the film, or at least the director ought to be. I mean, professionally, the director doesn't always have total control, but the director ought to be the final author of a film. And yeah, you have to be able to speak everybody's language, you know. And you have to understand why things are happening. Like in terms of story, even if you're directing a movie that you didn't write the script for, just the same as with the writer and just the same as with the actors who are playing the roles. Like you as the director, you need to be able to understand why things are happening. You need to be able to understand motivation. You need to be able to understand, okay, why did this character do this instead of that? Where does that get us in the story? Does that make sense? Why would they do that? Okay, if I'm going to put the camera here, why am I putting it here instead of over here? It's all, I feel very strongly that a lot of things can be boiled down to motivation, and that word needs to be applied in different senses and in different contexts, but it's basically, why are you doing this? Why are you doing this instead of this other thing? Why does this make more sense than this? You know, and if you can do that, or at least have a sense of that in terms of the writing, and in terms of your actors, and in terms of your camera operators, and in terms of, you know, if you're doing like something like a really big expensive production, you know, your composer, your visual effects people, like if you can at least speak their language and interface with them and understand, oh, okay, this has to be this way because of this, then I think you're much more likely to be successful as a director.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, yeah, 100%. And I think most directors that start making their own shorts early on and just getting in there and getting a camera, and you do everything yourself, and then you start bringing on people, and you know, by the time you come to use other people and you are just the director as far as the production's concerned, you know, oh yeah, I was a camera assistant, and I was a, you know, DIT, and I was this, and I graded, and I've done a sound mix, and you've done all that. And yeah, so writing is just as important in that learning, the skill set you need, I think, as a director.
Any other questions from the chat that you want to throw out, Steve? Because I have one to kind of close it out that's not about James, because I don't want to put him under the microscope for the whole show. But well, if there are people watching.
For folks watching, if you want to, if anybody watching has a question for James, go ahead and throw it in the chat, and we can ask before we get to Kristi's final question and wrap things up.
Yes, I don't know how much longer we have you, because I don't know what time you have to get up in the morning.
That's fine. No,
you're okay. to go?
Yeah,
All right.
good.
Well, but while we're waiting to see if there are any questions, James,
Yeah.
you just you mentioned Kurosawa, and I was going to bring this up earlier when we were talking about The Corridor and the fact that it's black and white and the fact that it's very film noir-y. Um, we we actually, on my movie review podcast that I mentioned a little while ago that I co-host with my best friend Jason, the last movie we did was Yojimbo. And my one sentence review of Yojimbo is, I wish I could review this movie every show because I just love it so much. And I've loved it since I first saw it when I was in my early 20s. And but there was something that Jason said in our review that it's one of the few times that I've like really, really super disagreed with him about something. He said, I wish that this had been in color. And the reason he said that was because, you know, he wanted, because of, you know, there are scenes in Yojimbo where like everything is literally just spattered in blood. Like there
Mm.
are, it's not a super violent movie, but when the violence happens, it's very explosive. And, you know, he's like, I wish that this had been one of Kurosawa's color films from later in his career
Mm.
when he did ultimately shoot some stuff in color. And of course it was brilliant. It was wonderful. But I don't know. I can't get my head around that. I look at Yojimbo in that beautiful black and white photography and I think, no, this is perfect. I don't need, you know what I mean? So.
Yeah, that's I think that's quite a strange. I don't think I've ever seen anything in black and white and thought, I wish this was in color.
Me neither.
I think it's, you know, I remember seeing, I find interesting when you have a film that it is in color and there is a version to watch that is, you know, a release version in black and white. And the main one I can think of is the Mad Max Fury Road release that was black and chrome, which got released at the cinema, and I went to watch it at the Prince of Charles in London. And it's obviously a phenomenal film, and it was a black and white edition. And I remember watching it thinking, this doesn't work. Like there's something about this doesn't work. It's a strange, doesn't work as black and white, and I didn't enjoy it. But I think maybe it goes back to, you know, if something is presented in a certain way, if it's chosen to be in black and white, you know, I just kind of go, well, that's the decision of the creator, and that's fine. And I'm, you know, well, I can like it or not like it, but kind of that's the version of the film. You know, I don't know if anyone's watched Schindler's List and thought, you know, this needs to be more in color. You know, and even film noir, like film noir is like when you watch neo noir now, LA Confidential, and it's not film noir, but I wouldn't want to see a neo noir made in color and made in black and white, sorry, because it's like it's supposed to be made in the 40s, the 50s, you know, like and it's just kind of etched into the blood of those decades of film noir. Yeah, so I mean, you couldn't really call it film noir and have it in bright colors. It would have to be, you know, called something else. But yeah, I don't know. It's a funny one to see something and think I'd rather have seen this in color. But
yeah,
no, I've never seen. I haven't watched Yojimbo and thought, if only there was a color version. You know, maybe someone will do a restoration and put it into color, but probably not.
That would be, and yeah, it was weird because my co-host, he's very much of the same mindset usually, like oh, give me something in black and white, you know, it's perfect. But it was unusual for him to say that. It struck me. It's like, why would you want Yojimbo in color? Just to see all the blood, I guess. But
Yeah.
We did get a couple of questions in the chat. How expensive is the cheapest production?
Well, I think, you know, I have made films for literally nothing, you know, and in The Corridor didn't cost no, The Corridor didn't cost anything.
Yeah.
Made literally nothing. There's no shoot. So I think it's I have always made my own work on incredibly small budgets. I've never gone down the route of finding financing. I don't know why. I just felt the time spent looking for financing, I would rather apply to the creative process of the film, and I could make anything for anything. If I have an idea and I have £100, I'll make the idea for it. I'll just do it in a different way, and that challenges me creatively. You know, and I think you have to be creative about every single process when you don't have very much money at all, which is you know, from who do you use to how many favors can you ask of people before they start going, when are you going to pay me? So you rotate your team, because you know, you can't keep paying people in whiskey. They're going to, you know, they actually need yeah, so it's I mean, yeah, I've done, yeah, it varies, but it's all very, very cheap. It's all been money that I've been able to basically pay out my own pocket, which you don't want to do very often, and you don't want to, you know, kind of bankrupt yourself by making a short film. So yeah, and it's, I remember someone watched Ruptured, which is a science fiction short, and they said it's a perfect example of someone who's making the most of the money they had, but not stretching it so far you can see through the budget and think, you know, you make what you've got, you use what you've got available, and you push it to its limit, and you don't go past it. And as soon as you go past it and you show a VFX explosion that looks bad, and you know, you have really badly recorded sound, and you think, well, this is, you know, rein it in and make your budget work for you and make the best film that you can make on your money. And if you can't hire a Alexa and, you know, and Zeiss prime lenses, then you should on your phone, but you make it a phone film that's whatever it is, you know. So that's a challenge. That's the creative challenge, which, you know, I think if someone gives you £1 million to make a short film, then like sky's the limit, which isn't very fulfilling creatively. You can literally do anything you want. Yeah. So I always try and try and keep my budgets down, but a small budget is a brilliant creative challenge, which I think, you know, is half the fun of this.
Yeah. One more question from the chat, and then Kristi, you can ask your question and we'll wrap up. This one is, which is more important, script or acting? Nice, easy question. Nice, straightforward answer.
Yeah, which is more important. I mean, I'd say they are both equally important. I think, you know, people say that you can't go and shoot something with a bad script. The script's bad. It's very hard to, if you've got a bad, you know, maybe not the dialogue. If you've just got a bad idea, if the script is just, is a bad script, that's your entire production. Is like, the script is the start, it's the blueprint, it's everything comes out of the script. You know, if you have a production designer, they look at the script. If you have a cinematographer, they look at the script. If you know, casting director will look at the script. That's why in a script, the characters' names are always uppercase first and capitalized first, is so the casting director can go, oh, there's a character there, there's a character there, you know. So yeah, if your script is poor and your idea is really lacking in anything interesting, or then you can have the best actors in the world, and it won't be very good. But if you have a really, really great script and you come to it with people that can't act, a director's job is to try and somehow, you know, figure it out, make it work. Everyone's directed actors that can't act, and you make it, you know, you give them different lines. You say, well, how do you want to say this line? And, you know, you get actors say a line and you're just like, you can't deliver that. It's not coming out right. And that means the line's wrong for that person. And creating an environment for people. And, you know, some actors don't struggle when they don't feel under pressure. You know, the child in Under the Bed never acted before. He's, you know, whatever he was, like a 7-year-old. And it was a lot of work just to get it sounding natural. And he wasn't an actor. So I would say it's the script. I mean, almost without a doubt, actually, now I'm thinking about it. You need, you know, good actors are great, fine. I've done plenty of stuff with actors that I'm like, yeah, they did the job, they were good, but I can't see them, you know, they're not going to win a BAFTA for this, but they did the job. But you think the script was the best script I could get it for this film. So yeah, I would say script.
Kristi?
So yeah, just a little closing question. And we've talked a lot about David Lynch, but now I'm curious, both of you, what are your opinions on Mike Flanagan? because Haunting of Hill House, Haunting of Bly House, yeah, all this other stuff. I kind of feel like that's too kind of like in that sort of similar lane of psychological fuckery. I can swear here, right?
Yeah,
sorry, did I just
course.
demonetize the whole thing? Okay.
Of course.
So that was it. So
I think Mike Flanagan's I think he's brilliant. I think what he's doing is brilliant. He's a very creative, inventive filmmaker who is doing a lot of interesting things. I haven't seen Haunting of Bly Manor House.
House, or like the Haunting of Hill House and the Haunting of
Hill
My
House,
Blanner.
yeah.
I think.
And I haven't seen Midnight Mass. I saw Hush, and what I've seen of him, I think is great. I mean, it's very commercial, digestible horror that is very accessible. So it's not always, I think he makes horror that the widest possible audience can watch and enjoy, and it's kind of like a sort of Spielberg way of making horror, which is great, and it's good. Yeah, and I mean he's the only person that certainly Netflix have that's really championing original horror, and coming up with a lot of really amazing things. I mean, the amount he did the whole of Midnight Mass himself. He's done, yeah. So I think he's really good. I think as far as horror directors go, he's probably not my exact taste for horror. But yeah, I mean, I think for horror as a genre, I think he's doing a lot of good.
Yeah. So you haven't seen the 3 Netflix shows?
I've seen, the first one was The Haunting of
Hill House.
I saw that one, and I thought it was great. I really liked
that
it.
one scene where he does like a 10-minute.
Yeah, that was brilliant.
Just technically really good.
It's that type of thing he's doing. He's really, and the thing was really clever about that adaptation was he took the book and like really pulled it apart and kind of explored in the whole family and different age. Like the original book is simple. It's a very simple ghost story, and I'd like to see The Haunting of Bly Manor. I mean, I love that. I'm a big fan of The Turn of the Screw, so I'm keen to watch it at some point. But he's constantly trying new things, which I will constantly take my hat off to anyone that just approaches something like horror and says, "How can I do this differently?" For a mass audience, that's I think that's great.
And I think he's really big on the feels too. I think his work really is about connecting human beings. Like connecting you to that thing, and not just kind of the cookie cutter, first girl or last girl or whatever it is,
exactly.
But something on that the feels side of the tone of it and the color. Steve, any thoughts?
Yeah, no, it seems like he's sort of the guy right now, especially as far as horror filmmaking goes. He's sort of like the most prominent. He's probably of if you ask people who maybe weren't necessarily movie nerds, if they could name a horror director, he's probably a name that would come up more often than other names right now. And every few years, maybe once a generation, it seems like there's a director like that is like the director, the horror director, or the fantasy director, the genre director of the moment. And he seems like he's that person right now. And I just think, oh, thank God he's good. because that could happen where it's like a director could get super popular or all of a sudden they're just working all the time and cranking out movies, and it's like, oh my God, why is this guy getting all the work? And with Mike Flanagan, I've never wondered that. Like, I watch his work and I see how popular it is, and I think, oh yeah, I get why this is popular. Like, this is good. The Haunting of Hill House was terrific. And I like that. His work is, it's commercial and it's crowd pleasing, but at the same time, he obviously has artistic ambitions, and you can tell, like, if he has an idea for a particular shot that, is maybe a little artsy, he's going to go for it. And I love that. I also really, one of the movies of his that we haven't mentioned yet, that isn't necessarily his greatest work, but I really enjoyed his adaptation of Gerald's Game, which was for Netflix.
I haven't seen that yet, but
Yeah.
It's not like, it's not a masterpiece, but it's really good. And, the cast is terrific. It's Carla Gugino and Bruce Greenwood. And Bruce Greenwood is one of my favorite actors ever. And I wish he was in everything. And it's just a really solid movie. It's
Yeah.
a really solid little horror movie. And so he's good, and like I say, it's nice that they're, in the 80s, it was maybe Wes Craven, who was also good, who was also good. And now it's Mike Flanagan. It's like, oh, I'm so glad that the most popular horror director is this guy who is good,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think,
and intelligent.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think as a filmmaker, he's inspiring because he tackles, Gerald's Game is a brilliant idea, like a perfect, contained, compact story, and it's a great idea, and he takes on those types of ideas, and I think he's doing Fall of the House of Usher at the moment.
That sounds right.
Yeah.
No, that sounds right.
Which is like, he's not just jumping on he's not doing the next Insidious film, or he's kind of going, what will people want to see that's completely out there. And Gerald's Game is an unusual Stephen King pick. I think it's not, it's absolutely brilliant. So I think again, it's someone who's making very bold creative decisions in everything they do, and making it very enjoyable and watchable, which is the two components I think you need is that sign of creativity, trying to constantly challenging himself, doing something different, but also making it very well and very effectively. Those combined, I mean, that's sort of the perfect match.
Yeah, there are directors who attain great commercial success and say, oh, I know what the people want, so I'll just keep cranking out the same sort of thing. And then there are directors who reach that level of success and go, okay, now that I'm here, I think I have a little bit more liberty to try some stuff. And I think Flanagan leans more in that direction than the other direction. He's like, now that I have a name, now that I have a platform, now that people, will watch a Netflix series or go see a film because my name is attached to it, let me see what I can do here. Let me see let me do a little bit more of what I really want to do now that I've got their attention. And I appreciate that about him too.
Yeah. And not just making adaptations. Like you say, ripping apart the source material to find out what really is in there, and then trying to figure out how to ways to make it to connect to a modern audience. So James, is there anything that you wanted to discuss that we haven't talked about, or anything you kind of prepared that we haven't quizzed you on?
I don't think there is, actually. I don't think I hadn't prepared anything.
I just didn't want, I wanted to ask. Otherwise, I mean, I've had a lovely chat, which was my goal in trying to get us all back together. So thank you.
No, thank you very much. Yeah, it's been great.
And everybody, if you have been intrigued by this conversation, don't forget to check out James's stuff. There are links in the video description. I think that would be great because he makes really, really great work. So I'll say thank you, James, for hanging out with us again and talking with us about your work. And I don't know, maybe next time we can talk about David Lynch.
Didn't really
Since
spend
we
any time on
we didn't spend any time on that this time.
You could talk about David Lynch for you could fill another 2 hours.
Right? His work invites a certain level of analysis. All right. Well, thanks, James, for joining us. Thanks, Kristi, for having the idea to do this. And dragging me in, as always. I loved it. It was a great conversation. And thanks everybody for watching. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.